It's the ideal opportunity for an infinite commemoration. NASA's Spirit Rover arrived on the dusty surface of Mars precisely 21 years ago, reforming our insight into the red planet. In fact, the golf cart-sized rover was initially entrusted with looking for hints of water on Mars, and it eventually fulfilled its mission with no trouble at all. From that point onward, we discovered that the rosy, gleaming celestial body was in no way, shape, or form as extremely dry as had been expected. But the Spirit mission also had a series of rather unsavory episodes in store. Sadly, contact with the rover was unexpectedly lost in March 2010. Since NASA specialists couldn't restore the connection in the period that followed, the mission had to end the next year. Luckily, Spirit was not alone in exploring extraterrestrial worlds. Its sister rover, Opportunity, was built in the same way and would continue to analyze Mars under the magnifying lens until June 2018. All good things come in threes. When NASA's Spirit and Opportunity rovers landed on Mars on January 4 and 25, 2004, they did not land in the traditional sense. Rather, they initially bounced across the planet's surface multiple times in a heap of airbags before finally coming to a stop. And while the rovers had left Earth on June 10 and July 7, 2003, NASA specialists had given them a very exciting assignment. Could it be that Mars, which today is a great representation of a probably dead and cold planet, once had water? Since the Mars Global Surveyor and 2001 Mars Odyssey space probes had already uncovered obvious hints of a previous lake, the specialists chose to select the corresponding area in the Gusev crater as the landing site for Spirit. Opportunity, on the other hand, got very close and personal with a small pit in the Meridiani Planum, on the opposite side of the planet. If everything had worked out as expected, the mission would have been over after about 90 days. Luckily, however, not all things go as expected. Eventually, while the initially anticipated mission span was only 90 sols, a sol is equivalent to 24 hours, 39 minutes, and 35 seconds, both rovers would surpass this target range by a wide margin. A brief explanation: 1 sol is equal to 24 hours, 39 minutes, and 35 seconds. But Spirit eventually covered more than 2,200 sols rather than the designated 90 sols, meaning that it was able to travel significantly more meters and take an impressive number of pictures. Spirit sent back more than 156,000 pictures to Earth. Yet, the rover's scientific work was not neglected either. Spirit took nearly 370 measurements with the alpha particle X-ray spectrometer and 933 measurements with the Mossbauer spectrometer, which was able to analyze Martian material without destroying it. As already mentioned, Spirit was not fixed to a specific location. Rather, with its 6 independently driven wheels, it was capable of exploring the Martian surface in a mobile way. In addition to the various cameras and spectrometers, the rover was also equipped with a swiveling arm, a rock microscope, and an instrument that allowed it to brush and drill a few millimeters into rock surfaces in the search for Martian water. While most of us would likely need a short breather after a long trip through space, Spirit began sending the first high-resolution color pictures from Mars to Earth not long after its airbag-supported soft landing. What we see is another Martian no-man's land sprinkled with reddish-brown sand and countless stones, which at first could easily be mistaken for a natural desert. No less amazing, however, is the first color picture of the central part of the so-called Columbia Hills, captured from a distance of around 300 meters with Spirit's panoramic camera. Yet, after the first pictures were taken and the first chemical and mineralogical tests had been done, an incident occurred that, in retrospect, seems like a foreboding sign. On January 21, 2004, NASA's ground team suddenly lost contact with Spirit. It soon became clear that Spirit's computer had malfunctioned and was continually rebooting due to a memory error. Luckily, the specialists were able to fix the issue quickly and resume normal operations. On February 6, the scientific focus of the mission, the search for past water, was still poorly defined. The analysis of the first rock samples showed that they were basaltic in nature and showed no signs of a previous wet environment. Undeterred, NASA decided to send the rover to the Columbia Hills, located more than 2 kilometers away. This is where the corresponding panoramic photo was taken on Sol 158. Spirit eventually arrived at the roughly 5-kilometer long and 3-kilometer wide mountain range and detected an exciting first clue. Spectroscopic assessments of a rock showed that it contained hematite, a mineral that can form in the presence of water, among other things. However, the decisive water discovery came on Sol 205, when Spirit encountered a rock called Cooley. This surprising rock contained a clear signature of the iron-rich mineral goethite, which contains water as hydroxide as part of its structure. And while this remarkable discovery was one of the most definitive signs of the presence of water on Mars, Opportunity made a similarly exceptional find on the opposite side of the planet. Specifically, Spirit's sister rover was confronted with countless blueberries at its landing site. Of course, these are not delicious Martian blueberries, but small rock spheres composed of hematite, which were either embedded in the layered rock of the rim of the crater or scattered before it. From this, the scientists concluded that they had formed inside the rock. This is crucial, as further analysis showed that they contained jarosite, a potassium iron sulfate hydroxide that typically forms in water. Here's the punctuated version of the text. What Sol learned about life on Mars. Sol then, at that point, dedicated himself to the task of climbing Spouse Slope and took another series of intriguing all-encompassing pictures on an edge beneath the culmination. Further journeys to Mole Slope, Low Edge Asylum, and Silica Valley followed, where Sol caught a dust demon, an exceptional air vortex around 34 meters in size. But the meanderer also had further outcomes as it continued looking for water. Sol had already identified a sulfurous material at Spouse Slope, where water particles were likely bound. The test encountered a rock with a high magnesium iron carbonate content, which came back down. This forms in wet and pH-neutral conditions and disintegrates in acidic fluids. Sol had uncovered an unequivocal sign that non-acidic water must have once existed on the red planet. In Silicon Valley, on the other hand, a sandy stirred-up region became the focal point of scientific interest. The interesting thing about this was that the sand in question contained 90% silicates. And, as a rule, such a concentrated silicate collection can only be formed under the influence of water. It's even possible that water from a natural aquifer was involved, and that amounts to nothing other than the fact that the district could once have offered favorable conditions for the development of life. However, the cutting-edge Martian environment was somewhat more hostile, as was shown by the intense planet-crossing dust storm of 2007, which severely hampered the further mission of the two wanderers. Less than 9% of sunlight reached the surface, and it took a while before Sol and Opportunity could resume minor activities again. After Sol accidentally broke a rock with one of its wheels, investigation of the rock's interior revealed that it could also have come from a hot spring. At the end of the Sol mission, a hibernation period was necessary to conserve energy, and another nearby dust storm later exacerbated the situation. Unfortunately, the worst-case scenario occurred on May 1, 2009. Sol got trapped in the extremely soft, loose material of the West Valley and was now stuck in a sand trap. To move the rover out of its problem, the scientists recreated its stuck situation even on Earth, but unfortunately, Sol could free itself only inch by inch. Luckily, in the same breath, it was still able to deliver enough power to conduct further investigations, which revealed that the sandy trap was a combination of basaltic and silicate-rich materials. Consistent with the maxim, a surprisingly beneficial development occurred. The surrounding surface layers demonstrated that liquid water must have been present here recently. This was the only way to explain why soluble mixtures, such as ferrous sulfate, had been washed down so far, while non-soluble minerals like hematite and silicates remained on the surface. However, there was still the problem that the rover was stuck and unable to move forward or backward. NASA responded by launching a high-profile campaign called Free Sol, which allowed the public to participate in the rescue efforts. During the assessments, the scientists concluded that Sol had broken into a pit filled with sand and covered by a firmer exterior. 6 months later, things finally got serious. Unfortunately, the ensuing recovery operation was not successful. Only millimeters could be gained by the few leading commands. During one of the rescue attempts, the right front wheel of the rover failed. The continuously declining energy supply and the approaching Martian winter did little to alleviate the situation either. On January 26, 2010, NASA had no choice but to report the end of the futile rescue attempts. From that point on, the rover was to act as a fixed observation platform. It would most likely have done so if radio contact with it had not been lost on March 22, 2010. Despite NASA's attempts to restore the connection, by May 25 of the following year, Sol never responded again. This marked the official end of the mission. The last picture that Sol sent to Earth in February 2010 showed us once again an all-encompassing perspective of a portion of the 166 kilometers wide Gusev crater, as previously referenced. Its sister rover, Opportunity, was also in a valuable location. Unfortunately, the mission ended after 14 years and 219 days on Mars, when it couldn't be woken from hibernation following a dust storm. The last images from Sol were taken on June 10, 2018, showing the faintly glowing sun in the Martian sky, just being obscured by the coming dust storm. And now, we'll show you how you can obscure the faintly glowing buy in button with your click press approval. Subscribe with joy so you won't ever miss another video from us again. We'll see you soon. I've added punctuation and divided the text into more digestible sentences. Let me know if you'd like any more changes.